Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to sincere, in-depth investigations into the paranormal, supernatural, and the metaphysical, with a special focus on the UFO topic. We take a sincere, analytical approach, thoroughly evaluating each case and its implications. Our discussions go beyond the surface as we engage with researchers, investigators, and experiencers to explore the deeper layers of their testimonies. We strive for high-resolution analysis, carefully examining evidence, patterns, and perspectives that challenge conventional thinking. If you're looking for a podcast that seeks deeper understanding, you're in the right place. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in with us tonight. Tonight we step into the shadowed edges of reality where love, fear, and interdimensional contact converge in one woman's extraordinary journey. Our guest this evening is Lisa Nelson. She's an author, experiencer, and she's an energy healer whose book, Earth Secrets Visitors, Are They Here to Help Us?, reveals decades of direct interaction with interdimensional beings known as the Guardians. And from her teenage years in Illinois, through Cold War era interventions, to extraordinary events involving life, regeneration, and time manipulation, Lisa's journey challenges everything we think we know about reality. It's a story that bridges science and spirit, trauma and awakening, and the hidden structures of what some call the Watchers of Earth. So settle in, turn down the lights, open your mind, because tonight we're going beyond disclosure. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm very glad that you're here. Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I think of myself as a regular person, although I have had quite an opportunity to see things that many people don't get to see. I grew up in the Midwest, about 25 miles west of Chicago, which turns out to have been a very anomalous area in the United States during the years that my book covers. During the Cold War, we were being taught as children how to duck and cover from the nuclear bomb. We had no idea that would help us at all. But we were taught that it was very imminent, that we were going to have that possible issue. And I grew up in a very nice neighborhood, and the neighborhood will play well into this story. There were quite a few young couples, newly married, who were starting their families. So there was a neighborhood of 28 kids that we could play with, and many of them figured in the story, and several of them agreed that I could mention them by name. And they are beloved friends since I ever had friends. And I played the violin and worried about grades at school and did pretty good in school, and had friends, as I mentioned, and enjoyed life quite a bit, 4-H club, all that wholesome stuff. And when I was about 8th grade, a new fella came into our area. His family moved adjacent to our neighborhood, so just around a couple corners. And in 8th grade, I had a crush on him, and that lasted for a while. And he never noticed me until sophomore year in high school.
Did anything seem unusual about him prior to meeting him? Like, did he have like just a different vibe about him? Did he appear to be a normal kid, or did he seem from the outset to be different somehow?
He was definitely different. Not only were his looks a little striking because he was platinum blonde and athletic build, but he was very, very intelligent. And I didn't know until later, and his father confirmed this to me, my father-in-law, that he had a 186 IQ. And so in a town like ours, where AP classes hadn't been created yet in high school, I think he may have had challenges of being unchallenged. And so he concentrated on sports quite a bit. He was very clever and witty and popular, and he used big words. And if there's something that would describe me, it might be that I'm a sapiophile, attracted to smart people, and I like words, as you might notice from reading the book. So he did catch my eye for reasons of personality and extra intelligence.
And how unusual is that for a kid that age? And how old was he when you first met him? How unusual is it for a kid that age to have such a high IQ like that at that age? Is that unusual, or that's probably pretty rare, right?
It does happen. I have a friend whose daughter has that exact same IQ, and it's a very challenging thing to have going on for a person. I think their perspectives may be different than we in the middle section of life get to enjoy, because we don't have to know everything. He was, I learned later, remarkably psychic. I myself have gone on to develop my intuition and have become a medical intuitive. So I think if I did not have those insights that I have from intuition, I think life would be less vibrant and colorful than it is to me now.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you can see more or hear more or receive information from the divine realms, for example, that I use in my healing work, it makes life very rich. So for someone to be in 8th grade, kids are very goofy at that age. We're just sprouting hair. We're very awkward. We're still kids, really.
Yeah.
Even it's hard to act smart when you're that age.
Yeah.
You are smart. We're just so goofy at that age. Don't know ourselves yet.
Yes. And was his intelligence in some way kind of inexplicable, or did he have a background or parents that kind of made sense or gave some explanation as to why he was so intelligent, or was it just kind of inexplicable as to why he was so precocious?
Well, his family, and I didn't know his family until sophomore year of high school when we began to date. So at the 8th grade point in time, I couldn't tell you anything about what his family thought. When I did know his family, which was around 1975, I was just not even 15 yet, and we had begun to date. They razzed him quite a bit. He didn't look like them, and they said he wasn't one of them. They made a lot of jokes about him being the milkman's kid. There were 5 boys in the family, so there was a lot of razzing that went on all the time. But they did always say, he's not one of us, just look at him. And
he didn't look like any of his brothers, just to be clear. He had brothers, and he was different from the rest of his
well,
family.
he looked rather different because of his platinum blonde hair, blue eyes. The others were brown haired. There was some resemblance, but he looks strikingly different in the sense of being so pale. People would tease him that he might be albino. He was very light skinned, except in the summer if you got a tan. but that hair was really white. So they gave him a lot of teasing that way.
I just want to interject real quick, before we move into him and when we start talking about some of the things that are pretty extraordinary. There is almost certainly, and even the most, kind of researchers like, say, Richard Dolan, who requires a lot of evidence and basis, before he believes in anything. He is definitely well aware and well of the belief that there are ETs walking amongst us, that there are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, ETs that are coming from somewhere, that are intermixed in the population, and people have experiences sometimes with these individuals, and have sometimes telepathic experiences. That's usually how they're detected. There'll be some kind of telepathic exchange. My own mother had this happen to her when she was living in Houston, Texas. Ran into a person who was, completely human looking, not really that different in terms of his physical appearance, but was not in fact that. And so there is this happening, and it's going on. There's a lot of basis for it. And it's still largely a mystery. I don't think we have that much information, on, what is going on with this. What are these ETs doing here? What are they up to? And I think your story kind of might shed a lot of light, on, one particular case of this, and might, sort of illuminate some of this mystery. So, okay. Let's go back to, so his name was Rob, right? And what age did you meet him again? And do you want to pick up where we left off with him, and maybe talk about when you first met him?
Well, 8th grade would have been around the age of 12, 13 years old. And in sophomore year, when I was 14 going on 15, is when he asked me to go to homecoming with him, and I was completely not expecting it because he had hardly ever spoken to me. And so I was pretty happy about that because I had a crush on him for quite a while. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's just talk about your first meeting, and I guess go into like the first, experiences that you started to, maybe the walks from school, where you started to realize that something was different about him. He started to tell you, basically, right?
He started,
about his identity. Right off the bat, did he start to tell you?
No, it wasn't right away. We started to spend time, and he started to walk to school with me, which involved about 3/4 of a mile walk to the high school. And some of it was down a stone path, so it was secluded and private. We were getting to know each other, went to the homecoming dance, and that went very well. And we were starting to see quite a bit of each other, even though we were very busy with our school lives. I was in orchestras and tennis and things like that, and he was in sports. So walking to school was one of the best ways to spend a little time together on the way to school. I thought it was really wonderful that I had finally caught the eye of the guy of my crush. So I was pretty happy about that. It was around the end of October and maybe early into November, when the air was becoming chilly, that he came to get me one night, and he had a very serious tone about him, and he asked if we could go for a walk. And we walked quite a while in the dark where nobody could hear us. And he told me that something happened that was disturbing him, which was that he had received a phone call from some beings. And so he had to tell me what happened to him when he was a little boy. And what he told me was that when he was about 4 or 5 years old, his parents and he had been driving down a highway in Michigan, and bright lights came over them. And his dad stopped the car and the lights continued to shine very intensely into the car, and he got out of the car and walked towards the lights and then vanished, and his mother did the same, and he was left there. So he was telling me that he was really adopted by the Barclays, and that he had been taken in by them, which he said explained why they teased him about being different. Now, that story was modified later as things continued, so I don't know whether I should jump into that now and jump ahead.
What did the phone call have to do with that?
The phone call had to do with him being contacted by the beings who took his parents, and he was very desperate to find out what happened to his parents. So they had asked him to meet with him, and he was portraying to me that he was afraid and he didn't know what was going to happen. And I spent that evening looking out my bedroom window after I should have been in bed, trying to see if I could see anything in the sky. And I did not, so I waited till the next morning when he came to get me for school. And as we walked to school, he seemed upset. He hardly talked at all until we were a ways down the stone path. And I asked him what happened. And he said, well, my parents are dead. And he was seemingly distraught about that.
Sorry, just so I get this clear. So he didn't quite understand what had happened until the phone call, or what was his understanding of the event? Or did he have any memory? Did he not have memory of the event? Or did he have some kind of ostensible surface level reason which wasn't true about what happened to his parents or where they went? And the phone call sort of revealed the real truth of what had happened to his parents. And then so therefore he just became distraught over it upon receiving the phone call? Or what was his previous understanding about the situation with his parents?
His previous understanding would have been that of a little boy who could remember that they had been driving down the road, bright lights came, his parents got out of the car, first the dad, then the mom, and they vanished into the bright lights. I think he was portraying some pain, emotional pain around it, and had been promised that he would find out what happened to his parents. So what he was really looking to get out of meeting, which was requested of him, was to find out, or maybe even see his parents. He wanted to find out where they were, what happened to them. And what happened was, he said they took him on the ship that night, and what he found out was they had passed away. And so he was very hurt by that news, as he said, and then he told me that they wanted him to work with them. Now that seemed very incredulous to me, because why would somebody want a high school kid? And the story develops, this was apparently a setup to break me into the idea that we're now going to be dealing with things not of this world. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a fairly good introduction to ease me in like that, but the story changed later. And it basically came down to, as time went on, when he had begun working with the Guardians, he said the reason they would want to work with him, that he was really athletic and very smart, and he would make a good warrior and good at doing calculations. And I thought, well, yeah, they have adults for that too, but I didn't see why. And over time, it began to be portrayed to me that he wasn't just a high school kid. He was a very, very, very old person who had lost his home planet to disease and needed to live on a planet that had an atmosphere like ours.
When you say old person, would you say that is synonymous with like the notion of old soul, meaning, he was very, spiritually developed consciousness in that body, or do you mean something different?
It could mean that. I think it could mean more than one thing. And in the sense of old soul, my brother, well, I call him my brother now because he's who's left of his family, and I began to talk when the oldest of the 5 brothers passed away. And we began to discover that I wasn't the only witness. He discovered he wasn't the only witness, but he said that he saw Rob change into a very, very old thing and saw his eyes like turn into something that was like 1,000,000 years old. And it scared him terribly.
And who was this again that witnessed this or had this experience with Rob?
My brother-in-law, who I now call my brother because we've adopted one another. There were 5 boys in the Barclays. Rob was the middle boy of 5. The first 2 oldest had passed away rather young, and Rob passed away also rather young, which was for different reasons. And the 4th brother has bowed out of the family, and Michael is the one who is available to me now in this day and age. But in 2018, it was when the oldest brother, Ron, passed away. Michael and I began to talk. And when we finally talked about Rob, because he had approached me years before and said, I've got questions about Rob. And I told him, I will answer any question you've got, but if you're going to ask me questions, no, you will get the truth and you might not be ready for it. And he did not ask those questions on behalf of himself or his brother, Ron, who had just passed. So we began to compare notes about the switching, which is what began to happen soon after the phone call where he had been asked to go on the ship to have a meeting, and they told him that they wanted him to work with them. He started telling me that he was going up to a craft regularly, which I found incredulous, and I was very doubtful of his sanity. And I was torn between thinking, I might be with a crazy person, or is this really kind of a dream come true? I had read Eric von Daniken's book and had this burning hunger to know about UFOs, and here it was. And it was very startling because reality is so different than reading about it in a book.
Mm-hmm.
But
now, before we go into that aspect, I just wanted to, just before we pass by this, because this is something I'm really curious about. Did he have any kind of inkling as to his identity before this time period? Was he now, because we need to know, what's going on as far as, these whatever they are, these blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings. Did he have like a kind of amnesia about his ET self? Was it just, did he believe himself at that point before the phone call to be just a completely ordinary human? Or do you think that he did have some awareness of his higher dimensional self, or whatever you would describe it as?
I would say that he was aware, but living very discreetly. Quite a bit of information that was given to me about Rob was given to me by holograms, which became the replacements that were projected instantaneously into his place anytime he was lifted into a craft. So the next thing that I was broken into was this idea that if he was going on a craft, he had to be replaced by a placeholder, which would be a hologram that would be a computer-generated projection that had the ability to convince a viewer of its solidness, its warmth, its fleshiness, its three-dimensionalness, and that I was soon to be introduced to this because I was going to have to start walking to school with replacements at time. And again, I was like, what is going on here?
So he informed you prior to this taking place that this was going to happen.
There was some buildup about it. There was talk around it. And then it happened suddenly because I started getting a little annoyed that things were getting out of hand. And suddenly he snapped his finger, and then the voice changed and said, "This is number 2. I am Rob's replacement." And it spoke in a rather mechanical way. And it could be comparable to the way Arnold Schwarzenegger portrayed the Terminator role, but that role had not happened for years yet at that point in time. So it was very robotic, and the holograms were in place very frequently and would switch in and out. They determined that the way to let me know that a switch was occurring, because it happened so fast that the eye could not catch it, was that they would snap a finger and announce who it was. Because there were times when the guardians themselves would come, and most of the time it would be a hologram. And number 2 was the first iteration. It was very crude, not a very good facsimile of Rob, not very much personality, and he had a pretty big personality. And then as time went on, different iterations were developed that got to be more sophisticated and capable of lying to me, which became an issue to me personally. But there was a lot of management that went on with these beings that felt that I was fairly inconsequential in the picture, and I was fighting for my recognition as a teenage girl who wanted a normal life and wanted her boyfriend. And there was objection on my part to all this happening, because I couldn't really get a way to verify that the stuff that he was talking about was real. I would think things like, what if he's an incredible actor?
Right.
And
So you were really incredulous, and probably super incredulous as to the hologram thing. But then you eventually just started to notice, I think, more and more things, like the glitches, as you say, in the personalities. And I think you just eventually, I think, spent enough time with them to think, that there is something happening here, to Rob, that this isn't Rob, that there is some truth to these replacements, as you describe them. So there's a kind of gradual, just weight of observations that kind of led you to, because I'm thinking that a lot of people are might have trouble, because this is something that's I haven't, at least anyway, myself haven't heard a lot of precedent for this kind of replacement or holograms replacing.
it's unusual. I
Yeah.
have come across specific. There is a section later that Nancy Tremaine wrote something that was pretty similar to one of the ways that an ET could get into your lover's body and take their place. When you kiss somebody, it's pretty difficult to kiss the same exact way somebody else does. A kiss is one of the most subtle and most unique things ever. And when the hologram kissed me in the hallway at school to make us look like a couple, I felt like I was with a complete stranger who had no feeling whatsoever for me. And I began to develop discernment as for essence. When with Rob, I could feel essence. When with the robot, I could feel hollowness and coldness and steeliness. And I began to measure what could I feel or what could I not feel, which really lent itself to the development of intuition later on. But it was the diary incident that let me finally understand that I was dealing with more than one party, because I had been suspicious that maybe he was a great actor. Would you like me to go into that?
Yeah, let's go into that. Yeah.
He had been telling me that I shouldn't write any of this down. The holograms had told me, don't write this stuff down. I had never told anyone I had a diary. My immediate family members would have known that I had a diary because I might have gotten one for Christmas. And I guarded it very carefully, but I was writing everything down.
What were you writing down?
Everything.
Like what he was telling you? And what
He's
kind of
talking about UFOs. He said he's adopted. He said his parents are dead. They want him to go on missions and do calculations. And they say he's a good warrior. And everything he was telling me, I was writing in very small print, so small, hoping nobody could possibly read it anyway. But what happened one night while washing the dishes is my mother answered the telephone, which was a landline, so you had to go and pick up the phone. And I was suddenly being yelled at in Rob's voice. And what I was being told was that I had really messed up. I should not have been writing everything in my diary. And do I even know where my diary is? It has been taken. Now, it was a weekend day. My family was home that day. And I ran into my bedroom to just check on my diary, and it was gone. It was not there. I very quickly tried everywhere I thought it might have been, if, say, my sister had grabbed it and stuck it somewhere else, but I could not locate my diary. I went back to the phone, and I was severely admonished in Rob's voice and yelling at me, saying, "Don't write this stuff down. Rob had to go get your diary back for you, and there will be trouble if you keep writing this down." Hung up on me. So I immediately called back trying to get Rob on the phone. The phone line was busy, so I ran out the door to go run over to his house, which was a good block away. And just as I ran out the door, he was coming up to my house. Now, the amount of time it takes to get from his house to my house walking is about 5 to 6 minutes. I had just been on the phone. I ran out the door, and there he was, and he was holding my diary. So I was floored because his voice was speaking to me very harshly, and he's walking up to the house. He could not have been on the phone because this was many years before cell phones. There were only landlines. Mm-hmm. He could not have been on the phone. And it was very striking to me, startling, that here on the one hand, I had someone giving me a hard time. And as I say, well, I can't get through on the busy line now that I've been hung up on. I run out the house. Even if I ran, it would have taken me 3 minutes. And there he was as I was coming out the door.
And you knew that's just, he couldn't have got there that fast. And so something
doesn't add up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was floored. And I began to say, well, if you're going on a ship, why can't I go on a ship? Can I go with you, or can I go? And he said, no, you can't. You'd freak out. And I kind of pressed on that for a while. Like, I need proof. I need to see. I need to know where you go. I need to understand what's going on. And it wasn't a lot later that I ended up on a craft. And it was something that occurred in the middle of the night. So there were no witnesses to that UFO. There were many witnesses to a later UFO that happened about a year later, or a couple of years later. But I had been sleeping and began to slowly be awakened by the approaching of a formation of helicopters. And
you could tell by the sound that it was multiple helicopters.
It was multiple helicopters. They approached and got louder and louder until I started to wonder what was going on, because that was very unusual to have that sort of air traffic in my town. As it got very loud, I wondered why nobody was waking up, and they stopped over the front yard of my home. And then I really was wondering, why don't mom and dad wake up? How can anybody sleep through this? But no lights went on in the neighborhood. They were in position. And I very slowly, calmly, strangely, got up and walked from my room to the front yard. And as soon as I came out the front door, the formation left. And I found myself underneath the belly of a very large craft.
Before you say that, though, you, I think, mentioned in another podcast that you felt you were in a trance as you were freaking out, and I just wanted to make sure we included that detail. You felt like you were in an altered state.
I did.
And
I
it
was very serene.
cool, the abduction spirits experience at this stage. Many times the abductee will go into a trance, before they're taken on board the craft. But go on, yes.
Since you're interested in that aspect of it, I do recall that when I woke up, I said, I'm asleep, but awake to myself. And strangely, when I was back in my bed, I said, I'm awake, but asleep. And it almost reminds me of hypnotic suggestion of some sort, but I must have heard it telepathically. But when it was in the front yard, I was looking at the underbelly of a craft. And as soon as the helicopters were gone, I was met with a very soft hum, very low volume hum, looking at a few cherry red, small lights, a few cobalt blue lights. And the next thing I knew, I was inside the craft, on my knees, looking down at my front yard. I was kneeling on something that was like curved like a bowl, and looking at the details of the roof, going, wow, that's what Dad sees when he fixes the roof, or there's my tall tree. And I heard a voice ask me to stand up. So I turned around, and there was a tall being who looked like he was trying to look pleasant, but to me looked dressed up. Didn't look right to me. Had a white jacket on, almost made me think children's dentist. Appeared to have a brown loopy wig that if it had been a colorful wig, it would have looked like a clown wig. But it was brown.
You say loopy, do you mean curls, or do you mean
Curls. Yeah,
sort of curls?
big curls. Yes, big loopy curls. Yeah, no man would ever wear a wig like that unless he was trying to be funny. And there was a smile on the face, but when it spoke to me, the smile never moved. The smile was fixed. It was then that I realized it was talking into my mind. And he said he wanted to ask me something. They had a question for me, and I began to feel all of the memories of my mind being rifled through. Well, similar to a Rolodex, where if you recall those office items, they have a circular file with index cards that slot onto the spool, and it circles until you get the information you want. You keep your contacts on there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I felt this rifling going on through my mind, and I began to object because I felt like I was being invaded. And I said, hey, let me answer the question. And the answer I got back telepathically is, no, we'll get it. You would convolute the answer. But I did see that they were getting really into all the corners of my mind, really into details of my life that I hadn't thought about in a very long time. After they were done doing that, they asked me to come over into another part of the room. I noticed a control console, and I got very fascinated with trying to take in the details of that console. And they said, don't look at that. And they instantaneously put up a white light partition between myself and it, like a wall that was made of light, so I couldn't see it anymore. When I was doing the details of the book, the guides, which are my spiritual guides that we all have, told me that the reason they couldn't let me look at the console was that it can be affected by thought. And since I was being fascinated by it, I could have disrupted its operation. So they were keeping me from affecting it in some way with my naive mind. But as I was directed to come over into a different space, a tabletop materialized, floating. There were no legs on this thing, and it was at about belly height for me. And rose out of it about 3 rows of lit glyphs that rose up out of the tabletop, kind of came up like this. And the I'd call him Smiling Dentist, said, "Which one is yours?" And I beheld each glyph and knew that it meant something, but it either resonated or did not resonate with me, which is interesting that I was reading it that way. They were, again, either ruby red or cobalt blue. Very pretty lights.
You mean like symbols when you say glyphs, like a symbol?
Like Egyptian things that you would see on a tomb where they have symbols that are mean something, but not in English. And I was looking at them, and some of them I kind of knew what they meant, and some of them I knew had no relation to me. And I had been asked to pick show them the one which was mine. And interestingly, when I had gotten to about the third row, I had noticed one, and it resonated with me in a way that said, "This is mine." And so I pointed that one out.
In what way did you feel that it was yours? Like, in what sense was it yours? Can you describe that a little bit deeper?
There was an inner knowing, and I don't believe that it spoke to me per se, but I knew that it contained information about me. What happened moments later probably had more to do with what they were up to, which is that after they expressed being pleased that I had apparently picked the right one, a laser beam went into my eye, and I began to see a myriad images, some of which were memories from even dreams or memories of being a very little girl, maybe at an Easter egg hunt in my front yard. Favorite memories, dreams I'd had long forgotten, but I remembered at the moment they were important to me.
And you saw these in your mind's eye, you would say, or were they? They
were coming through the stream. The laser was either reaching them or projecting them to me. And I was also seeing things that looked like sacred geometry, things that were very angular, things that looked mathematical. I didn't know what a lot of it was, but I do recall thinking to myself, I'd sure like to remember all this. I really hope I can remember.
It felt very profound and significant in some kind of way. Like there was much more to it than what you could see on the surface. Like there was like a massive story here or some kind of information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Felt there was a great deal of information there.
But
and I wanted to retain
it. Lisa, I have a question.
Yes, Todd.
Now, you had said that these symbols or glyphs, you could see them, and you understood what these were, correct?
Well, the resonation for me was like, no, not this. I was kind of feeling my way through these things, because when you're looking at a language that you've never seen before or symbology, you hope to get some meaning from it, but some of them definitely were like, nah, I'd feel like a thud in myself as nothing here for me. There were some that were partially aligned with me as I beheld them. And then there were others that were pretty close, but not all the way. And then there was one that I just felt that it was in alignment with me. So that's why I was using the word resonation. Pardon me. There was a sense that there was like a wave that said, this is it.
Okay.
And that I use the term inner knowing, or we use the term divine knowing, where you just don't question it. You just know what you know. And that is really important with channeling, for example. And it may have been a sort of automated sort of channel where I might have beheld it and see if it was similar enough to me to identify with it. But it's also how we choose our friends, isn't it? We go on resonation.
Yeah.
And we use it all the time as people.
And you was communicating telepathically, correct?
The guy was the tall one. Now, I forgot to mention so far that I also had noticed at a point that there were about a group of little guys. And I had never seen or heard of any other type of aliens because, again, this was before Close Encounters or E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
Now these ones were in like monk-like robes, correct?
They were in very burlappy looking, monk-like, and they were tiny beings. Like, I don't think they were much taller than the desk that I'm sitting at. Big egg-shaped head, big eyes, little pointy chin, stick arms. They used a rope to hold it together around them, but they almost look like stick figures with these big egg heads.
So let me ask this question: the one in the white coat, the tall one,
Tall guy.
what was his function there?
I believe because the little guys were almost as if cowering behind him. And I noticed that they were I intuitively knew they were trying to hide from me by being invisible, but I could still see them. And they were almost cowering behind his leg.
A little bit like the hybrid children. The hybrid children exhibit that same behavior. They're a little bit shy, and they will stand behind the tall gray or the darker gray. That has been said about the hybrid children. I don't know if these are at all related to that, but that reminds me of that. But yeah, go
on. I would add that I wrote the first draft of this book in 1994, so there was still a lot that wasn't being shared yet. But in 1986, 77, around that time, there was very little being shared. What was a big craze at the time was Sybil. So I was referring to that in a sense to think that when Rob was switching with the holograms, I had to wonder, I actually in my mind would call him Boy Sybil once in a while because of the switching that was going on.
What is Sybil again? I'm blanking.
Sybil is a story of dissociative identity disorder, which is commonly known as multiple personality disorder, but that term has been changed to DID.
Mm-hmm.
And but the issue with DID, which I researched and is a section in the appendices of my book, is that the players, the inhabitants of a person who has multiple personalities inhabiting that person, is they don't know about each other in particular.
The alters don't know about
They operate without knowledge of one another. Now, in the situation with Rob and the holograms and then the Guardians, was that it was a very coordinated effort. I would be told, I'm walking you to school today because Rob is on the ship doing calculations. And as it would walk me to school, I would hear more stories about other planets. There were many times where I was taken on walks where I would be shown the sky where there might be three unusual lights, three in a row sitting in the sky. And I would be told, keep your eye on those three, that those are ours. And you're looking at UFOs right now. And I'd be thinking, wow, cool. I never have seen those lights there in the sky. My friends and I were sky watchers from loving to watch the Perseid meteor shower every year. And in that particular occasion where I'm mentioning the three docked lights, after a length of time, the hologram said, now look back at the lights. They're going to disband. And the three in a row went instantaneously at this, like a bullet. They went so fast that they were there and then they were gone and they all went in disparate directions. And so I knew that what I was walking with and talking to was something that was directly connected with what was going on in the sky.
Okay.
That was another indication that Rob was, maybe he was a great actor, but he was also not the only one at the party, so to speak. There were times when the Guardians came and talked to me, and it was usually when they were going to drop a big one, a bombshell sort of amount of information on me.
They would talk to you through Rob.
They would talk to me through Rob, and the way they would describe it being handled was they would put him in an unconscious box, is what they called it, and they took control of his body, and that he would not remember when he was put back. So it could happen that we would be sitting on my living room couch having a conversation, and suddenly there'd be a snap, and I'd get an announcement, "This is the Guardians." And they were tended to be very stern and not warm and fuzzy in any way. And they would tell me what was going on, or it's time for you to know something. And they would add on to the story of the history of Rob, him as an ancient warrior, or they might tell me things about the planet he had been from. They called it Eros, A-R-O-S, and called him an Erusian, and he had told me the story of the demise of his planet and why he had to live here, and talked to me about other iterations of his existence on Earth that had gone back by centuries. So it is possible, back to your question or your comment, that people are asserting and your belief that there are others living here on Earth. The Guardians did tell me that there were 7 others at that time living on Earth. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than that, but they told me at the time which countries it was. There would be 1 here, 1 there, maybe 2 there, but
now of their own particular race or group.
They didn't talk about anything like grays or reptilians or anything like that.
They gave the impression that they were the only extraterrestrials, or that they were the kind of sole visitors visiting the planet.
They did not say that, but what they describe themselves as is being like part of the fabric of the universe. So I think what they were telling me was that they were disincarnate, non-physical, and that they were in a protective position to guard planets that were too young and unevolved yet to participate in, we could say, the neighborhood of galaxies, that we would be vulnerable to invasion by more powerful or nefarious actors who would come to possibly enslave or possibly plunder resources, and also spoke very often about the problem of nuclear weaponry in our country and the Cold War with Russia. And they began to detail to me that they were going to unbalance the Cold War, and that they were going to do it by using telepathic downloads to advance aeronautics engineering in the military and help them develop certain craft that they were very interested in, and that they were making appearances at nuclear weapons sites and knowingly creating national security emergencies. They were very clear about that. We watched Detroit, we watched NORAD, we watched, and they would name different places where they would watch and say that they made appearances at. So it was the work of Robert Hastings, who wrote UFOs and Nukes.
And that was, and you were told this long before Robert Hastings wrote his book or started talking about this, right?
I was told this in the 1970s. It turns out that I met Robert Hastings in 1981 before he went on his the beginning of his first tour. But the book was not released until 2008. So it wasn't until I discovered his book in 2017 that I realized that his work actually verified what the Guardians were telling me, which was that, yes, they took their UFOs and parked over by nuclear weapons facilities. So that was one way I was able to know that that particular point that they were telling me was in fact the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they would displace Rob and use his body to speak to me, which is the way the Guardians would do it, they would put him back and he'd finish a sentence he was in the middle of speaking.
Oh, really? Oh, that's an interesting detail.
Yeah. We'd be right back to where we were.
And would you sometimes like tell him and was like, what had transpired, while he was unconscious? How did that go down, or did you not tell him about?
They were pretty serious about me not telling him because they had begun to tell me that he had powers. They described him as being magical. And a movie that they were very interested in around 1977 was a movie entitled Wizards. And it talked about a planet where the survival of the planet depended on having the most advanced technology. And the only way to have the most advanced technology was to merge magic with technology. And it was told to me later on that the reason they were interested in Rob was they said that he had magic and that they needed him so that their technology could supersede, so that they could be the predominant enforcer of protectionism towards these smaller planets and to prevent piracy on vulnerable planets that aren't part of the galactic connection, the web of planetary connection.
And was it implied that Rob had this and they didn't have it, or this was something rare? This was a rare commodity. And magic, I mean, that's probably like a euphemism of some kind, right? Like they're probably giving you the word magic when probably something else better would do if you had the vocabulary or background understanding. Or do you think that they meant magic in the way that people conventionally understand magic? Because I see magic as like more like there is no magic. There's higher physics. There's physics that we don't know about, which from our perspective is magic, but it's all just unknown physics, undiscovered physics. But
there is that definition, and Robert Hastings sent me an article that talked about magic is now being used in certain theories of mathematics now. But it was also defined that magic can pertain to the idea that when people are confronted with technology that they cannot comprehend, they go to the idea of it being magic. Now, the Guardians talked about genetics quite a bit. And to give you the placeholder for the day and age, in the 70s, genetics were just beginning to be understood. I don't even recall whether they were trying to sequence the genome or maybe had come close to it or had just around then sequenced the genome, if I remember correctly, the synchronicity. But the Guardians would talk about his genetics having come from a paired couple. And they talked about his parents from this other planet, that his father had been a military guy and that his mother had been an artist, a creative sort. And they paired them, it was said, to get the desired outcome, a genetic outcome. They mentioned to me that I had a genetics that they were interested in, but I couldn't tell you anything about that. And to me, that was pie in the sky because I certainly don't know the first thing about my genetics or what would make it special, because I come from a lineage on both sides of my family of farming people who worked the earth. So I never
What is your ethnicity, if you don't mind sharing? Is it, because we've heard some things said about Celtic lineage and also certain Native American lineages as being particularly valuable to certain ET groups.
My own lineage is on my dad's side Swedish and Danish. And then on my mom's side was Germans who migrated to Russia in the 1700s to farm and then escaped some of them escaped genocide and got to America in about 1900. But they were Germanic people. So you hear about people talking about Nordics and people from that region of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I really can't say anything about me having any special genes. I wouldn't have anything to say about that.
And they never gave you any more information. I've heard something from an insider who I think is a pretty credible insider, talking about something about the meta gene factor, and it relating to something about manifestation and certain lineages having like an enhanced or somehow more developed capacity to manifest or something like that. I'm not sure I really understand.
That's really interesting because I have come across in my readings stories of translocation. And some of the people who have had pretty close Sasquatch contact have seen things that caused them to hypothesize that they're using translocation. I have talked.
What is that exactly?
Translocation, for example, Christopher O'Brien, when he was alive, he was an old friend of mine. We were friends before he became an author and paranormal researcher. We've had a good 45 years of friendship. He and his brother were hiking out in the Pacific Northwest, I believe it was, and they became aware that there was probably a Sasquatch behind them, and they were getting a little scared. And Chris O'Brien does not get scared. I have never heard him, only twice have I ever heard him say he got scared. But he said that they were getting nervous because there was something tracking them behind them, and they were very concerned that it was a Sasquatch. And suddenly, it was not behind them; it was in front of them, and they had heard a shrill whistling sound before this transfer occurred. So he was of the belief that he may have been pretty close to a situation where it transported itself from behind them to in front of them. Now, in translocation, there was a story, I believe it was Tom Kenyon wrote about it, where there were some, I think it was in Russia, there were some guys who were seen, they were monk-like and very advanced meditators, we could say, and they went into a cabin and did not come out for such a long time that the person waiting for them gave up and went to town. And when they got to town, the people were already there.
Interesting. I've never heard of that. I've heard, a lot of stuff about, levitation, from monks, but you would assume that, that they would be able to access all of the, sort of psi abilities and like translocation or teleportation as well, if they could do levitation. But that's interesting. I've never heard that, but I'm not surprised that there is an account like that. So translocation is essentially like teleportation. They're synonymous terms.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
I suppose the meaning of it is going from one place to another.
Instantaneously through.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I hope I didn't make up that word. I don't think I made it up.
No, I think I've heard that word before.
I don't think I made it up. It's not used very often.
Now, all this stuff that Rob was doing, according to who was speaking through the replacements or the hologram. You mentioned that he was doing, you know, missions and or calculations and things like that. Did he have any conscious awareness of what he was doing, or was he going into an altered state when he would be taken, and then that altered state be compartmentalized from his central personality when he got back? Did he have conscious awareness of all the activities and things that he was doing, or how did that work?
He was aware. He was aware. There were times when I was given, either by him or by the holograms or the guardians, artifacts from other times of other lives. One was a diary that was written in German. And this thing was brittle and written in the ancient sort of script, like when you write with a quill pen. And I knew enough German to be able to get the sense out of it that it was pretty poetic. And they told me that it had been his and they wanted to give it to me. And there were a few other things that I had for a while that had been given to me by the beings. Unfortunately, later on, I was in a new relationship and he was pretty spooked about it and demanded that I get rid of all the items. And I wanting to put things behind me, I did get rid of them. But they would illustrate to me things about his life of having been on Earth in other centuries and other times. And they started to talk a lot about technology. When we got to college, and he was really a lot more involved, mainly in calculations, not so much missions. And he was continuously going to the magazine racks at the university library and checking on the developments of some craft. One that they were very interested in was the X-29, and the other one was the Stealth. And Rob was constantly drawing angular drawings. I could never make sense of them. They didn't look very airplane-like, but I was told that it was more encoded so that people wouldn't know what he was doodling. But he was continuously drawing. And they watched the X-29, often complaining that they were never getting the wings right. That plane had been intended to have extreme agility. They intended for it to almost be able to do right angle turns, almost turn on a dime.
And this is a plane, a U.S. built?
Yes, the X-29 was, I don't recall if it was Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin. But my book contains an interview with an engineer from Skunk Works and the space program. And I asked him whether he had thought that there had ever been telepathic downloads given to engineers that he was working with. And he told me that he believed it was entirely possible because it was uncharacteristic for them not to draw out every slight iteration of the way. He said they were building without having everything completely mapped out, and said that the leaps in the progress were so large that he didn't believe it was the normal engineering process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to mention that. That is something that I absolutely believe is happening, and I think there's a lot of kind of evidence. There's always been kind of known for a long time about this phenomenon with scientists and philosophers and just thinkers alike, where an idea will just suddenly, like a fully formed idea, will just pop into a person's mind, or I can't think of a specific name right now, but there's definitely been scientists that had, a really genius idea, for some kind of technological invention that just strangely just came out of nowhere, just sort of emerged in consciousness inexplicably, and that became, the seed for, some important invention. So there is some anecdotes for that kind of thing going on.
I had happened to have met at different times test pilots and engineers for each of the companies, one Lockheed and one Grumman. And I was at the home of one who had cut me off. He had asked me in conversation what was my book about, and I told him, well, I had a lot of UFO experiences. And he said, oh boy, I've seen things in the sky. And I said, oh, tell me more. And he shut me down really hard. And I waited about 5 years, was at his home, and I noticed that he had a lot of coffee table books about aeronautics. So I started thumbing through. He asked me what I was looking for, and I mentioned that I was looking for the plane with the forward swept wings. And he said, come here. And he took me to a filing cabinet and pulled out some drawings that had to do with that plane, with that craft. And I asked him, were you involved in that? And he said, no, my best friend was in charge of that plane. And I asked him, did he ever mention any telepathic downloads? And he shut me down again really hard. And soon after, he got very angry at me and never spoke to me again. So I apparently pushed some sort of a button with him, and I knew to respect his privacy at that point. The interviewee from the book felt like the leaps were so transilient that it wasn't normal. They should have been drawn out, and he said they weren't drawing them out completely. Mm-hmm. He said they were just building it. So I think, and also if you've ever talked to Ray Hernandez, the Foundation of Research for Extraterrestrial Encounters, they did some research. I think it was around 2016. I participated in all the levels of it, but they had quite a few people who said that they have received telepathic downloads of technology. And I think it's probably happening a lot more than we know.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting sort of thing to mention, is that the telepathic downloads, that have, stemmed or have given rise to, technologies, that's probably the tip of the iceberg. If we know that that's happening, I mean, I imagine that there's below the waterline, just some extraordinary truth there, to that, as far as, the entire underpinnings of our civilization, might have been, kind of seeded from the outside or seeded from the other side, let's say. I've always thought that, that it is probably not insignificant, the level at which ideas have come from the non-physical realms, into this realm, and have given birth to really important elements of our civilization and society.
I am of the feeling that quite a bit of influence is coming into our society very gradually. I'm also of the feeling that disclosure is really going to be handled by the ETs. When you think about the issues from within the government, meaning lack of respect for the presidency or of Congress or the law, and the amount of threats that people have received, that would take a development of some respect, B, becoming law abiding, and C, revealing who's been threatening our whistleblowers. Those are pretty big hurdles. You can legislate all you want, but if you can't trace the money to unacknowledged projects, then you can't find out who's spending it to build and back engineer.
Yeah, right. And
That's
I think,
a pretty dynamic situation.
yeah, I'm kind of the mind too that the deep state, or really I think it's more appropriate, the breakaway civilization is so entrenched and technologically advanced that that it would, like one of the directors of Lockheed Martin Skunkworth said, it will take an act of God, for this stuff to come out. I think we do need, and it just, I can't see, an easy way, for us. So long as they don't want it, I should say, so long as the powers that be don't want disclosure, they seem well capacitated to continuing on into the future, prevent that from happening in any meaningful way.
Well, I didn't see Doge coming up with any discoveries of massive unaccounted spending.
Say that again, sorry.
I didn't see Doge coming up with any location of massive spending without accountancy for all the amount. Imagine how much money it takes to build, say, anti-gravity. And one thing I want to point out is when you're dealing with entities that can lift a person and instantaneously create a replacement for them, that's one. Number two, you can put people down in the appearance, beings in the appearance of somebody, and make them look through the use of illusion. If you can make things look like other things to people through suggestion, if you can suspend somebody's spirit and then inhabit their body, that's a lot of technology.
Yeah, that's
now Chris O'Brien argued with me when I told him that there were a lot of craft that would fly low to the neighborhood, and I was being told that that was alien craft, that it was not commercial traffic. And they said that the way they did it was they tampered with the air traffic control to show it as a commercial flight rather than something that shouldn't be there. Now, during that time, during those years, there were a lot of very low-hanging craft. And we weren't that far from O'Hare Airport, but there was no reason craft should be that low, say 25 miles from O'Hare Airport. And before then and after that period of time, that was not happening. They were flying in much higher because it was still a long ways from the airport. And they said they could easily tell the air traffic control systems to say that's a flight, a commercial flight. That's not us flying around keeping an eye on things.
Right. So that makes me think, and Todd, you might have something to say about this, like when the drone situation was happening and everybody's looking in the sky and seeing these objects and then going on to whatever system that is to see the transponder location of known jets. You can't trust that. I mean, even if it does come up, oh yeah, that's just a conventional aircraft, it shows right here, it's a Boeing 747. It may be, well, what you're saying, them sort of masking or giving out, that signal that says that they're this or that, aircraft, when it's truly, in fact, something NHI.
We really would do well to think about the fact that there are technologies that we can't see, just like we can't see telephone calls passing through the air. They are using principles of non-physical things. Later, they began to talk to me about biotechnology and how the androids that they had told me that the Barclay family was partially android. that they had set Rob up with a family.
What do you mean by that? Explain that a little more.
It was explained to me much later that Rob's family was partially biotechnology.
Now, the mother and father that were taken, or the family?
The adopted family was actually so to speak, an artificial family. But the way I have had a close friend who did some channeling for me, and she told me that what happened there was that Dad was completely human, Mom was partially, and that the kids were sequentially, as each of the kids came along, each one was more human until Michael was almost completely human. But at the time they started talking to me about androids, they were talking about them as being more like robots, but with skin on top. And they were talking about how they could operate, but you could touch it and feel skin because it was living skin. And they talked about eventually these things were going to grow into actual beings. So that was probably not easy for Michael to hear when he read that. But this was later on in the situation with having contact with the guardians. I was starting to get tired of the whole scene, and we were getting towards the end of college. There was one situation where they had let somebody down to visit me that was a real problem to me in Rob's form, and I was very upset about it. And there was a point in time where Rob was said to have brought a craft down low to his house. I was picked up from home by one of the holograms and took me for a walk, which was very often to the schoolyard of the elementary school I attended, and said that they had a problem, that he had brought a craft down low, and it was going to cause a stir if the thing got into the news. And when we got back to the neighborhood, there were a group of several kids standing in the driveway of one of our neighbors, and I found out years later there was another group of us from the neighborhood watching this craft from down the hill, a few houses down. And that is what is depicted on the book cover, is the rectangle. I call it a rectangle UFO. There are actually many. There is a website that catalogs rectangle UFOs, but this was a UFO that sat in the sky in our neighborhood for probably 2 hours. It was about 7 p.m. on a summer night, so the sun was still fully out. It was just after dinner time for most of our families. And there was hardly a cloud in the sky except for what was surrounding that giant rectangle in the sky. It was about, I would estimate, to be about as large as the World Trade Center with no openings on it, no doors, no windows. It looked like it was really massive. And there were groups of us, 2 of them, that watched and pointed at the sky and said, "What is that? What are those weird clouds?" And it was dusk by the time we started to lose interest in it. People started to get sleepy and wander home. But there were conversations about, oh, should we report it? And oh, the reporter newspaper will be closed by now. Who should we call? And I was not wanting that to happen because the hologram told me that if he was discovered to be connected with that he would have to move. So I was very much against anything about reporting it. When I was researching the facts of the book and looking for evidence that I could offer to people, I contacted about 10 people that I knew were there that night. And about half of the people who I contacted recall standing there for quite a while, pointing at the sky and wondering, what is that? And when I would ask them what it looked like, 5 of them said, I can't tell you, I don't remember. So it was very interesting that many of us could not were not able to retain a memory of seeing it other than pointing at it and being there. So that was an interesting thing that occurred during the college years.
All right. So I have questions, but I am busy marking them out here.
It's your turn.
You know, your story is completely fascinating, and I thought that by bringing that PDF up, I would stay where I'm supposed to, but it's not that way at all. When you're describing it, it's not the same. Your story's the same, but where we're going isn't. So I'm marking notes here and not doing a good job of paying attention.
Where were we supposed to go? Maybe I can circle back to something I glossed over.
That's okay. You're doing fantastic. I'm just trying to catch up.
Okay. Well, I was kind of fondly remembered those pictures of the X-29.
Yes, and that's a fast plane.
That's a fast plane.
When I was researching that to show that picture, it's 1,100 mile an hour. It goes.
It goes fast.
It's the first plane with the forward wings like that was able to go that fast. So it's definitely a fast plane.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the black triangle craft on the cover. Is there any story or reason for choosing a black triangle?
Yes. Strictly personal. My brother-in-law, who is now my brother by spiritual adoption, had an experience. He lives near Kankakee, Illinois, and about 3:00 in the morning one night, he was outside smoking a cigarette, and a triangle craft, he said it was about 3 stories tall, completely silent and massive, glided over him going down the street or over the street. And it was moving very slowly. And he said he couldn't hear any sound coming from it at all. So I put that there for him. Mm. So this actually was a family book in the sense that everybody participated in terms of people from the neighborhood. Every member of the Barclay family, including my father-in-law, signed that it was okay for me to use our real names. Mm-hmm. So I was very touched that the family members were on board to let me be as completely open and honest as possible. And so I make mention of them. And so I put Michael in that sense on that cover. The photo of Rob was taken by Robert Hastings in 1981 when I did sound effects for Robert Hastings' first multi-screen slideshow production of his lecture that he was embarking on quite a few years, I think maybe 3 decades of lecturing around the country and other countries about disclosure. I actually wonder if he may have been one of the first proponents of disclosure, because he was at Malmstrom in a control center, and when UFOs showed up and they appeared on the radar, and they kicked him out of the control room because he was there as a janitor at the time. And he became aware that UFOs were showing up to nuclear sites and said, wait a minute, we paid for all this and they're not telling us anything. And he has always believed that we are owed answers. And so it's been going on a very long time. I was in music school at the time, and he knocked on my professor's door and said, "Where can I get some sound effects made?" And my professor said to call me because I was familiar with the synthesizer studios.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you had I believe it was chapter 10. You had wrote that the Guardians were concerned about how power and technology are used on Earth.
Yeah.
Is that like an ominous thing? Like sometimes when we talk to others, they mention that there was some kind of a warning or something like that. What can you elaborate on that for me?
They have been very clear and that nuclear weapons are a problem, not only to us, because we're not very mature in the way we deal with humanity and other countries, and the warring nature of humanity, but the fact that it could really damage other planets that are unconcerned with our issues or not even maybe integrated with us because we're still operating in isolation, and that it would be harmful to other dimensions. And I think when we're talking to other dimensionals, my view of reality is that it's like the keys of a piano. You've got the very lowest and the very highest, and the highest is love, and the very lowest is
Fear.
maybe hatred, fear, self-loathing, those kinds of things. And we tend to exist in the middle in a pretty naive sort of narrow bandwidth. But any key on the piano that you strike is a resonation that has beings living in it. Just the way physics will striate light when it passes through a watery mist or, say, a human body, you're going to get bands of red, orange, yellow, green, sky blue, indigo, violet, white, the same way a prism reflects light, because humans are very watery and energy is passing through. So you get that light, and that's how you get the colors of the chakras. It's the very same thing. The principles happen over and over again. So when you have, say, our country believes that anything that flies through the sky is potentially our enemy, that is why I brought up the question, are they here to help us?
Mm-hmm.
Because we need to add that into the equation of how much are we going to shoot first and ask questions later. They have been apprehending beings that haven't done harm, and these beings are not alive anymore.
Right, but are the when you deal with things like munitions and bombs, and no matter what, we're careless as heck. That's just how it is. They have that. How long ago was it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago? They wanted to deflect an asteroid, so they shot a nuclear weapon at it to blow it up.
Did it did?
To deflect it, and it did. It actually deflected it. But what are the ramifications of using nuclear technology in space? I mean, there's nothing going to stop it. It's going to explode, and that radiation's going to go somewhere.
And I think there's subatomic particles, or there's forget how this was put. The product of a nuclear explosion extends, I think, beyond this frequency that we're on, or this physical plane. I've heard that there's some aspects of the detonation that not only affect this physical 3D reality, but realities beyond that. I think you actually mentioned that. And I think that's the problem. And I think there are like ley lines on the planet, there are lines in space or connection points, I think, to other star systems. And I've heard that the detonation of nuclear weapons can damage these connection points, or can, through the connection points, actually affect the points that we're connected to, these other places that we're connected to, because everything is one. Yeah, everything is, there's interconnectedness. We're all kind of, I think, in some real sense, there is no, distance is an illusion. Time and space. The spatial dimension might be a kind of illusion, and it's all kind of, one thing, in one place, and maybe for that reason as well,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I need to fix this, because I said it was a nuke. I remember them talking about nukes. It was NASA's DART, and it was a double asteroid reflection test mission. And that happened September of 2022. The spacecraft was flown directly into the asteroid at 15,000 mile an hour, and it actually did deflect the asteroid.
Mm-hmm.
So
job.
I mean, if this is, and I do remember hearing them saying something about, well, we could use a nuke and do the same thing. If this is something that they're thinking about doing, the ramifications, it's no wonder that extraterrestrials are trying to warn us, because that would be, wow, that would be disastrous on all levels.
We don't even know the harm we could do. And Appendix H, I think it's 13,000 nuclear warheads between, I'm going to look it up because I wrote this section at the behest, a telepathic impulse that I received when I thought I was done writing. And when I talk about the concerns of the advanced beings, I looked up how many nuclear weapons are there in the world, and it is a massive number.
Yes.
And so many countries have them now. And we have egotistical world leaders who will go quite well out of their way to be the winner.
Yes.
And our belief, humanity's belief in separation, nationalism, for example, keep people out. These are not worthy people. The amount of hunger and starvation that goes on because we can't make a connection. And it won't be until we really start to connect that we're going to be able to evolve. And one thing I'd like to mention to you, Jim, is that I do quite a bit of long distance healing. Most of the clients that I see are quite a ways away from me. And the energy goes where it's needed, and intention sends it where. And it isn't, the energy is not bound by time or space. So when you think about taking an atomic bomb and that kind of energy and what it could rip through, I don't think we have the slightest idea what damage we could do. And do you think really we're anywhere close to being able to integrate into other planetary societies or systems with the sort of pleasure taking that is going on in determining one group of people is way better than another group of people? These people deserve to have everything, and these people don't deserve anything. The one hallmark of the Guardians is they always spoke as we. us.
Mm-hmm.
There was never an individual. It was we. And I think we need to become a we if we really want to talk about advancing.
Because we really are one single thing, or one, reality, or energy, let's say, the energy that is reality, is one single field, and the health of the health of the whole is contingent upon its individual parts. And so, like, it's highly logical, and rational, and wise, to incorporate that understanding. We have to treat everybody as if they are us, because it's axiomatically true, and we're actually benefiting. It isn't really even just service to others, it is service to self as well. It's a service to the whole, is benefiting all.
We could sure use a lot of more of that idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
For
We just have to
love, the highest vibration.
We just have to discover that. Maybe the way we get there is, we actually, come to this understanding scientifically, that we truly are connected. I mean, I think, quantum physics, is not really that far away, from understanding, that, non-locality and things like that, that it is, just all one thing, that separation is an illusion. Yeah, I think that's how we could get there, is just, if that science wasn't suppressed. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, they're obviously, preventing that discovery, from happening.
The action of healing in itself is reintegrating aspects of ourself that we've separated from.
Mm-hmm.
They refer to it as remembering, folding back in the parts of yourself that are too painful. But the process of healing means bringing it back in, working with the feelings, and having love for yourself unconditionally, and self-forgiveness. And it would be so great if we could extend that to everyone, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Todd, we haven't let you talk.
That's okay. I'm trying to get the research in there, and then
we go on without you.
And you two are like, we're gone. I'm like, and then I look at the time, and I'm like, is it time already? Like, what happened?
Yeah, we'll have to wrap up here, because I have to work a night shift tonight. That's a little bit earlier than normal.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on our show and talking with us. And the book is excellent, and I'm going to make sure that I put the links out again, all of your links, so that people can look you up. They can find your book. Yes, very, very good book.
We didn't talk about the regeneration event, so they could read it word for word.
Yes.
Gotta hear it in a hurry.
There was quite a few that I didn't get to, because I was hoping that when you told your story, it would say, you would go kind of chronologically, like how the book was. But we got off topic, and we went around all these different and down these different rabbit holes. So yes, it was extremely interesting, and I loved every minute of it.
Jim's questions are so interesting.
He has a lot of very good questions.
He's been doing a lot of thinking.
Yes.
It's really fun to encounter that.
Yeah. I think that there's a need for, just that kind of inquisitiveness, in this area, but yes, absolutely.
Yes. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Lisa, again for coming on the show, and we'd love to get you back. And
we could do that.
Now that we have the synopsis of what your book is about, and now I'm not having to try to come up with all these questions. I can do it just on the fly. We would definitely love to have you back on and continue on with what you experienced.
Yeah, and I think we could go much deeper into the question of, are they here to help, and
Yes.
talk about that a lot more. That would be good to.
There is that.
Yeah.
They're not all here to help, but I know that some of them were.
And that's why I went with those questions that I went with about the nuclear weapons and things like that. I think what was the name of that chapter? I think it was called Democracy.
Democracy was the thing that led up to Rob getting killed.
Yes. And,
vigilantism in New York City at the time being rampant. We could pick up from there.
Absolutely.
That's pretty dramatic, and I tend to get pretty adrenalized when that happens. And
I think that would be great to start from there.
Okay.
That gives our viewers and listeners a chance to catch up, possibly get your book, and then they'll know where we're going. It doesn't really matter. You tell the story so good that, I mean, literally, you're not going to get lost. I got lost because I wasn't paying attention. I'm busy going through the PDF, and I'm like, where are we at here? And I'm even typing in a search what you're saying. I'm like, it's gonna come up.
I should look stuff.
No, you're good. But yes, thank you very much. Jim, thank you for all your insightfulness and your questions. I'd like to thank everybody who is watching and listening. I'd like to thank Simply Heidi, who was a big part of the chat tonight. And until next time, everyone, keep your mind open, your heart grounded, and remember, truth isn't just out there, it's within us.
That's a great blessing.
So thank you, everybody, so much. I guess that's it. Everybody have a wonderful evening. We'll see you later.
Blessings, everyone. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Todd.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. And you can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.